Hi, this is Confused Matthew and Stand-In Stan, and tonight we are reviewing a movie that we just got done watching. You may have heard of it, some of you anyway. The movie is called Twilight, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you already talked about this.
I watched it months ago, and I wrote a written review of it, and for anybody who liked the film, you're probably gonna like what I have to say about it, having watched it a second time. For those of you who didn't, might be a little disappointed, but I actually liked it a lot better the second time than the first.
Well, this is the first time that I've ever seen it, and this is a lot of people have requested that I say something about this, and I had no interest in seeing it. Saw it purely for popular demand reasons. Right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and give this a lot of Confused Matthew tax credits, because there's a lot of things that need to be taken into account before you start talking about Twilight. This movie was not made for me. Right. I am as far away from the target of this movie as you can possibly get. I'm a 28-year-old male, have never been a teenage girl. Right. If you are a teenage girl, you know, the teenage girls predominantly read these books, and I think they predominantly went to this movie.
If I could just say something real fast about that, in my written review, which was all negative, that was my first biggest problem that I think really clouded my being able to enjoy the movie as the movie that it was, because my reaction, frankly, was, girls are smarter than this. I thought to myself, well, I know that doesn't have anything to do with the movie, and that's sort of, that I was overcome by that when I saw this, because every time I see a movie that's targeted at a young female audience, I end up thinking to myself, okay, these movies are always about either a woman triumphing over a man's world or romance. And I thought to myself, you know, why can't there be a movie made for girls that deals with humanity, not just femininity? So but that's more a criticism of the industry, I think, than it is the movie. I just want to say before you go on, because I'll let you go on with what you were saying after this, but I have never had this happen to me before. This is a first in my movie-going experience. There are movies that I've watched that I didn't like, and slowly over time I got to like more, like the new Star Trek movie, a couple others that I can think of. And there are movies that I watched that I really liked, and over time I started to like them less and less.
The Last Samurai?
The Last Samurai,
Good.
yeah.
Thank God.
I still like it, so fuck you. But no, but this is the first time I've ever watched a movie once and had one strong reaction, and then watched it a second time and had the exact opposite reaction.
Well, here's what I have to say about the film, because I think the majority of the people who... There were a lot of people who hated this movie.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Hated?
Oh,
I don't think there's... Well, I mean, I guess I did at first, but...
Yeah, hated. I mean, really hated. Like, this is supposed to be one of the worst movies, like, just horrible, garbage.
I didn't go that far.
And I think that's why I got so many requests for it.
Right.
But I think people hate this movie for just the reason that you were talking about. I think this is one of those movies like Independence Day, for example, where I believe the majority of people who hate it for what kind of movie it is, rather than for, you know, on the movie's own merits. So, just giving you my opinion on the film, taking in all of these things into account. I'm not the target. There's not a whole lot of anything in this movie that's directed at me. There's not a whole lot for me to get involved in. Right. This is a specific kind of movie for a specific kind of audience, and I understand that. Even taking that into account, judging the film based on its own merits, I still just thought that this was on the low end of okay.
Right.
I mean, this was... The characters are not very engaging. There isn't anything particularly new here. Even when you get into the vampire territory, I mean, they can walk around glitter on them, apparently. Right. Other than that, there's not much different about them. The characters aren't very distinct. But I think that's also... There seems to be kind of a limitation in the writing as well. It felt to me like the people who were writing this weren't very confident. They weren't very confident in what they were releasing here, and it felt to me like, as far as the characters go, as far as the dialogue goes, they were really playing it safe. There were a couple of things that surprised me, but not much of it did. I really felt like they were doing the safe road. They were going to make this begin, middle, and end be a traditional romance. They weren't going to go outside of that, and I was bored I think 80% because this movie isn't targeted at me, and the remainder because it wasn't written very engagingly.
Right. Well, you can see the playing it safe aspect just in the rating. I mean, the climax of the film, she sort of snaps the guy's head, and then you get a blurry shot of the fire behind him.
I was going to say
they were really shooting for that PG-13 rating, which is always the playing it safe thing. A lot of the stuff involving Bella, the actress who played her, was just under 18, and I was actually sort of amused at all the different camera tricks that they used to not show her certain aspects of her upper torso and not to show certain aspects of her lower torso.
You'll see it in the next movie.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I was going to tell you that after the movie was over. Watch what they do to that. Watch what they do to her visually in the next film. Yeah. But in this one, there was a scene where they were lying on the bed together, and she's almost half of her has got to be off the bed because they can't have certain things for obvious,
I mean, that's understandable. That's
absolutely. And you know what else is understandable is their budget limitation. I don't know why this movie didn't get a bigger budget.
I want to say something about that.
Okay.
This book series has been compared to the Harry Potter series, which I'm a huge fan, except for the last book. The last book was garbage. The last book was Confused Matthew garbage. Okay, well, if I ever do a book review, I'm going to review that book. That'd probably be the only book that I ever... Yeah.
Okay, so what...
fucking garbage. That book fucking sucked.
Okay, Twilight.
Okay, but as far as Twilight goes, the only similarities that I see between Harry Potter and Twilight, which I have not read, is that they're two popular book series. Mm-hmm. Other than that, there's nothing else.
Popular fantasy book series.
Yeah, well, Harry Potter is a way more fantasy oriented than this. This is a love story.
Supernatural, right? No, I understand.
Yeah.
But anyway,
but what I was going to say was, I can see the Harry Potter films getting people interested in reading the Harry Potter books. In fact, I know that this has happened before. Right. I can't imagine this movie encouraging anyone to go out and read those books. It didn't encourage me, and I understand it's not directed at me,
I think that people... I think this movie was made for the fans of the books.
It was.
And that the Harry Potter films were made for movie audiences.
Yes.
I think that's the difference you're talking about. But just to talk a little bit more from my perspective about the film itself... I said in my written review, which anybody can go read, by the way, it's still up on my MySpace and other places, I said that the romance was dull, the actors were dull, and that there was really no chemistry between them. I don't feel that way so much seeing it the second time. It wasn't riveting by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
But I sort of liked these two. I kind of liked... Edward was in a really difficult position in the movie. I like the fact there are two things I appreciated that they didn't... Two places that they didn't go in this film and apparently in the books that they could have. The first was the fact that Bella has a good relationship with her sort of messed up family. Mm-hmm. She has a good relationship with her stepfather. She has a good relationship with her biological father and with her biological mother. You didn't get this element that they could have done of, you don't understand me.
Yeah.
Edward understands me. No, she didn't feel like that. She was sort of nice to everybody, and she had a good life already.
I wanted to say the thing that I was surprised by is the fact that they didn't put her in the high school and make her an outcast.
Right.
And then they're going to bond because they're both outcasts.
No,
I was actually... Because... Mm-hmm. A girl that looks like that is not going to be an outcast.
Would never be unpopular. And that's the first thing I thought when I saw the movie, and I liked that. Even seeing it the first time, I thought they were going to do the same thing, and I said exactly the same thing. Okay, a girl that looks like this, she's never going to be unpopular. She was with the popular kids
automatically,
right?
And I did like that. Yeah, there were a few things that surprised me. Not many.
I like the fact that there was one line in the film. The early half of the film is a lot better than the second half, and I think this goes back to your playing it safe thing.
Yeah.
It's like they say to themselves, okay, what should we do with this? What should we focus on? Romance, drama, or action? Let's sort of throw all three of them in here and there, and we'll hedge our bets, and we'll play it that way.
Play it safe.
Yeah, but in the beginning of the film, there's a scene where she's going to get hit by a car, and Edward stops it with his hand, which is obviously physically impossible for a human being. Mm. And she corners him on it later in the hospital. She says, and he keeps denying it. He's like, "Oh no, you don't remember. I was, standing way over there." She's like, "No, I saw you." She finally pins him in. He goes, okay, well, nobody's going to believe you, so... I really like the way he said that. He sort of didn't know what to do. Yeah. He didn't have this forced confidence that a character like this could.
Yeah. We've been sort of complimenting this movie almost as if... as if...
For low expectations.
Yeah. The thing is, it wasn't that great. I mean, you can say that there were a couple of things that they did that maybe they didn't have to do, and this and that, the other thing.
I think there was a lot more effort. This movie wasn't effortless. And
it wasn't doing a lot of effort.
And the thing is, it could have been. This is why I give it a little bit higher marks than I think I would normally give a movie like this. It could have been, and in different hands, they could have made this just, let's rush it out to theaters because we're going to make a lot of money on a book series. I think there was an attempt here. It didn't work probably more than 40%. But I think there was an attempt to make this an interesting and enjoyable film.
The thing that surprises me is you would think that this, of all things, would be the film where they're like, we're going to make money no matter what we do. I think this film suffered from the opposite problem. It didn't seem to me like they were very sure about this. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like I said, they kept on playing it safe. They kept on going with the routine. I don't know how much that's like the book because I haven't read it. But just as far as the production goes, I don't know why this didn't have a bigger budget than it did.
Neither
the special effects were terrible. It's no fault of theirs.
No, in fact, they did a lot of creative things to try to get around that.
Yes, they did.
Especially in the climax, when you don't have a big special effects budget, have these people flying around and fighting each other. They used a lot of people falling through glass, falling through windows, a lot of lighting, a lot of slanted angles, a lot of real comic book angles.
And Matrix baseball.
Yeah, exactly.
And I understand that a lot of the actors took ballet classes to move more gracefully.
And they did, and they studied the movement of, I think it was cheetahs or something, to move more gracefully. Yeah. I think that hurt the film a little bit. I was
like, does the girl have to lift her leg up like 10 feet in the air whenever she pitches?
Yeah, and do they have to sort of stand there and lumber around like that?
But I do give them credit for at least, trying to bring something to the table.
They did put a lot of effort into it. One last thing about the special effects. In the climax of the movie, there's a scene where the hunter guy jumps over Bella, and he's on wires. That needed a slow-mo shot.
Yeah.
That looked corny.
If anything did.
And if they had slowed it down, it might have looked a little bit menacing. So anyway.
To get back to the reality of the situation, though, this is albino teenagers gushing at each other for 2 hours. And maybe there's a place for a movie like that, in the world, but it wasn't very interesting. You really do have a lot of ridiculous things in this film, like when he's telling her, when he will approach the girl to say, "You need to stay away from me."
And she was staying away from him.
If he hadn't gone over there,
she wouldn't have been within 10 feet of him. I put that in my written review, by the way.
Yeah, that was pretty silly. And
also,
I had also noticed that he seemed to be having randomly hard times controlling himself around her. Like, she comes into the school and he's like, God, I gotta get out of here or I'm gonna eat this girl. And then he comes back later and he's like, hey, how's it going? And then the next day he's like, dear God, I want to eat you. And then like the next day it's like, hey,
you know why that was? If you notice this, every time he had a problem controlling himself is when they needed to explain something about him. Mm-hmm. It was entirely at the convenience of exposition, and boy, in the middle of that film, did it bogged down in exposition. And I don't even think we got enough exposition about the sort of the parameters of these vampires specifically, but boy, did that slow down when that happened.
I think there could have been more of a focus on who the characters are rather than what how the vampires work,
right.
Or, there's a lot of how the vampires work in this movie.
There is.
And then there's a lot of, I didn't hate the two main characters. I cared about them. I didn't care about them much, but I cared a little bit more than I was expecting.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that there was any good reason for them to feel the way they did about each other. It was just like they did because it needed to happen.
I sort of gave that a pass because that might be explained in the next movie, because obviously this is some kind of unprecedented thing for him.
Yeah, but we're never told what it is.
No, but we might be told that in another movie.
I hope so.
I gave it a pass, but in this movie, you do have to just sort of accept. Okay, fine. But you know what though? I think they pulled it off to where especially in the dinner scene when they're just talking to each other, where we get engaged just enough to sort of overlook that a little bit. This movie was a little bit better than it had to be. And I know I keep sort of saying that, but I think that counts for a lot in a film like this.
Yeah. I'm never going to watch it again.
Yeah, no.
It didn't really leave a lasting impression on me. I'm probably going to forget it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. It's formulated beyond belief.
Yeah.
It's trite. It's one-dimensional. It's thin. It wasn't very interesting. It wasn't very good. But it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not one of the worst movies that's ever been made.
No.
It's not as if a movie like this won't have a home somewhere.
Right.
And so, I don't really think that this, whether this is good or bad, this one really isn't my call. I mean, that's for another audience altogether. So that's really my 2 cents, is that, it is what it is. And if you like films of this sort, you'll probably like this.
My 2 cents, if I had to give it a rating, I know you hate ratings, I'd say C+.
C-.
Yeah. It's Mr. Average movie.
All right, so that's how we felt about that. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you guys all later.
Take care.